practical digital transformation. So what do we mean when we say practical digital transformation? I want to think back to Sherry's presentation on the changes in IT we saw over the past few years. And one of the things she actually picked up with was digital transformation, right? And that term got thrown around a lot. And as Sherry said, we did a lot of planning, we did a lot of thinking, we did a lot of creating of project plans, but we didn't do a lot of it. And IT leaders, I think, were getting tired of hearing that term, especially when they were occasionally tasked with leading the execution of very complex or override engineered digital transformation projects. And then came March of 2020, COVID hits, and there's no time for these big plans. There's no time of dealing with steering committees or whatever. Everyone was just rushing to execute and manage a difficult situation, right? And that rapid adoption not only accelerated transformation and digital maturity across the board, but it created an environment for the opportunity for companies to think about digital transformation differently. Instead of thinking about it as a complex strategic initiative, to think about what we're going to call practical digital transformation. And we're going to look at the changes in the market that accompany that shift and how taking a practical approach to digital transformation can deliver more successful business outcomes, or maybe I should say much more successful business outcomes, because the data said the bar was very low. This is research published by Boston Consulting Group a couple of years ago. They said that 94% of companies have big aspirations, but more than 70% of them fail to achieve their objectives. So why is this failure rate so high? Why is this so hard? So in a recent article in Harvard Business Review, Didier Bonnet, who's a professor and thought leader on the subject, he heads Capgemini's digital transformation group. He identified three reasons. The first two are kind of the things that we see in why any really big, overblown, over-engineered project fails. One is there's lack of a strong strategy behind it. If the leadership doesn't set the right objectives or has unrealistic expectations, that's always a problem. The second area he focused on were the reasons why execution problems happen in projects that are too large, whether that's communication or governance problems or prioritizing technology over adoption, focusing on the wrong metrics, all of those sorts of things. But he identified this third and what he calls the most underappreciated reason, and that there's a learning curve to digital transformation, and most companies need to walk before they can run. So, many companies have kind of learned from that during that period of time between 2020 and today, and are shifting that view from large scale strategic initiatives to this kind of ongoing and making transformation an integral part of how the business operates. And this is a quote from John Moore in Tech Target, really good article. He said digital transformation became a buzzword over the years, and there's just a lot of fatigue amongst IT leaders. So more of them are redefining digital transformation, and what comes next will be more smaller projects, higher levels of automation, and a dose of pragmatism. So let's look at some of those factors that led to this shift and some of the ways that successful organizations have adapted. And to illustrate these, we're going to share some data from Forrester and you've seen some of the quotes, you've seen some of these charts before, but in the fall of 2020, after kind of the dust had settled over that rush to digital transformation, we commissioned a study at Celigo with Forrester. We surveyed over 400 IT and finance leaders about their state of transformation and maturity. And this summer, we commissioned a follow-up study using the same model, asking many of the same questions. And we wanted to see if the changes we were perceiving and that we were seeing, whether the data would back them up. And spoiler alert, we did. So the first thing we looked at was this, okay, has there been an increase in spending in digital transformation? As Sherry said before, that a lot of spend has now become, less impacted by negative economic news. And there's a perception that digital transformation is important and ongoing. And that's what we found. 67% increased their investment during that COVID period. 65% of the organizations we surveyed increased their investment post COVID. And this 85% actually came from a different study, a Gartner study. Gartner probably focuses on slightly larger organizations. but still 85% plan their increases this year. So that has continued. A big question where we're trying to find is where do you self-identify to the respondents? Where do you identify your assessment of your own digital maturity? And as we expected, obviously, and as Sherry pointed out in her data, that maturity continues to increase. So there was a reduction in 25% who were calling themselves immature, a reduction in 17% in those that said they were transitioning, an increase of 22% in who said they were mature. And we asked a different question. This is was a question of where do you see yourself and your organization in your journey to digital maturity? And there's slightly different questions, but there was an increase in 15% of those who said we are in a constant state of of transformation. And this is the chart that shows that. And it aligns so much with what Sherry showed earlier. And I know I find this chart really interesting because for me, can a digital transformation actually be complete? What does it mean to always be in that state? And if you find this question and this chart interesting, please stay tuned for when we have the upcoming experts panel, because this is one of the charts that we're going to discuss in a lot of detail with our guests. But that being said, I believe that 30% that is always in a state of digital transformation, that represents the group that John Moore is talking about, who've adopted a practical model. So what is this model? What can organizations do to get there? So he points to these 4 ways that IT leaders are changing up. They include a shift to shorter, focused initiatives, an emphasis on automation, an increase in agile approaches across the organization, and a focus on projects that will integrate existing IT systems in effective ways. And this aligns with, why is my forwarding not forwarding? There we go. This aligns with what Didier Bonnet said. So his said, to succeed, you want your digital transformation to start with modernization. And these initiatives should be manageable in scope, provide significant measurable business impact, be designed to build digital capacity across the organization. And this is similar to what Mark was talking about before. When you build digital capacity across the organization, whether that be people, process, or technology, that enables the momentum to continue and the growth to continue, and it becomes an exponential versus a linear growth in transformation. So again, we're going to look at these in terms of people, process, and technology, and I'm not going to repeat everything that Mark said, but it certainly starts with people. It starts with and I love that term, leveraging a workforce of hackers, right? We have a workforce of hackers, and they can do so much if they're properly managed with governance. Now, this chart certainly demonstrates that the majority of businesses have now understand the importance of modernizing their business process. And you see the 20%, only 20% are not planning any process automation or transformation at all. And I sense a correlation between the 39% of businesses that reporting that their transformation journey is in progress with that 40% that are concentrating on automation, because that concentration on automation, I think Mark may have said this earlier, but an automation first mindset enables people to be much more, it reduces the complexity of I think Sherry said this as well, it reduces the complexity of where you should be focusing your time and efforts, right? If you just when in doubt, you automate, you can continue to move that thing around. And when I think about her finding that 60% of organizations have a formal automation strategy, that's where I see this alignment, right? They may not have a formal strategy, but they continue to drive automation in a decentralized way, which it may not be optimal. I mean, obviously in a perfect world, we'd have a detailed strategy and we are acting on it, but it's better than not acting, is to continue to try to drive improvement in that decentralized way. I think Mark said something similar here. This number should not surprise anyone, but we found a 55% increase in the usage of SaaS from our 2000 survey to our 2023 survey. And again, We did this in the fall of 2020. So if there was some way of going back further, I think this number would be considerably higher. And again, that number Mark mentioned, 100. I have seen I have seen studies from everywhere from 100 to 200, depending on the size and complexity. But there's no question there's a ton of SaaS out there. And Mark quoted this same stat that Salesforce found: only 29% of them are connected. And this also, I hearken back to what Shari said about so many people thinking of integration and automation reactively and thinking, well, I'm going to buy a system and I'm going to buy an application. I'm going to stand up my app. And as Mark said earlier, a lot of those apps are being bought by different line of businesses, not necessarily aligned or coordinated in a way so that we create more silos. And it created just a huge requirement for integration. And we found, and again, my clicker is not working that well. Sorry about that. We found this real change in organizations' adoption plans for iPaaS from our 2021 survey or 2021 report on the 2020 data. At that, we saw the numbers of people who said they have no plans for adoption of technology has gone down 44%. And we said planning to adopt has gone down 6%, but that's because so many more have adopted. We found an increase of 118% in iPaaS users. People's, reactively reacting, that's terrible language, but they bought all these SaaS applications, they found this need for integration, and then they went out and found the tool for it, and they're starting to use it. And here is the current state of adoption. Almost half the organizations that we surveyed are current SaaS users, and a huge majority of those non-users are planning to adopt an iPaaS solution. And this so aligns with what Shari talked about, that need for integration and automation, that need to be able to deliver, and you need to be able to do that to deliver those other projects in those other areas, whether that's, depending on where and how you've prioritized that. So another interesting thing is just we asked, what capabilities are important for you in this that should be part of a modern iPaaS. And of those capabilities that were rated critically are very important. Two of the top three are things that were focused on improving business processes and automation, right? And the other being AI and machine learning, which is certainly understandable today. So to kind of, bring that all back together, with the elements or the pillars of practical digital transformation, Shari talked about the importance of connecting IT output to business benefits and to keep momentum and executive support. We think not only that, but if you could focus on smaller initiatives that impact the business and provide you with quick, visible wins that make it easier to secure resources that allow you to build that muscle across the organization and allow you to successfully complete larger projects and larger initiatives. Automation as transformation. If you think about automation as a key driver for transformation, if a focus on process automation, it's going to reduce that paralysis by analysis, right? It halts that need to, okay, what should, if we don't have time or we don't have the resources or our organization not set up in a way that we're going to have a very complex, strong, strategic project plan across, then at least people can, in a decentralized way or even in a centralized way, focus on automation. Automation is always going to be better than not automation. And that allows more people and the people on the ground in the business units to embrace transformation and participate in those projects. And those all put together, right, that's going to increase that enterprise-wide agility, as Mark talked about before, right? Leveraging the entire organization, the business users who understand the business, to better apply the power, the more advanced power of your developers and IT resources and technical resources on more complex projects. That's going to further accelerate transformation and automation. And finally, that focus on pragmatic integration or focusing on integrating existing systems, right? That's going to reduce your overall spend. You're going to get greater return because you're going to provide more automation, better integrations, more effective and efficient business processes, better information and data for decision making. And all of that's going to improve the return on investments on these technologies that are already part of your tech stack. It's a win in all of those ways. And a little ad here, but if you're interested in exploring this topic more, you want to become a practitioner of practical digital transformation, we wrote an ebook that can help. It was actually published a year before John Moore's article, and yet it's completely aligned with those 4 pillars. And we propose a model for how you can accelerate your digital transformation. And it's got a very specific step-by-step blueprint for rapidly implementing automation. We're going to provide access to this along with all of those other resources after the event.